So we're going to start with the continuation of the story of creation. There's so much madness in the world. I love studying Torah because it's it's a real anchor. Like you're always hearing different things and people are always changing their mind. Society is changing its mind. There's like tremendous upheavals happening around us culturally, spiritually, morally. Values are changing. But the Torah that we got from God is eternal. So it's a pleasure. It's always there for us to read. God doesn't change his mind. Right? There's a pasuk that says that God is not a man who would change his mind. One day he wants this, the other day he wants that. He's very consistent. So we're very privileged to be reading this pasukim. And we were studying about the fourth day of creation. That's the day that God created the celestial luminaries. It's on page 11 for those of you who have a book. Can I give you, does anybody else want a book? You want, yeah? No, you're good? Okay. Yeah, here, page 11. And we're going to continue because we started this last week, and there was a couple of questions that we have to go over in reading the Pesukim. So let me just find my bearings, and I got it. Okay. All right, let's start. So Vayomer Elohim, we're in Pasuk Yod Daled. Yehi me'orot birkiah hashamayim, let there be luminaries in the space of the heavens. And I explained about space last week. You remember we discussed the general theory of relativity, how that perfectly describes space and the consistency with the Torah. Lehavdil ben hayom uben halayla. The reason that God creates these luminaries is several. There's several reasons. Number one, to distinguish between day and night. Okay? At the simple level, you have the sun in the day, and you have the moon at night. And we say this in Mosai Shabbat. Atachon antanu. Ben or ben choshech ben yom halayla. So this is one of the plans of creation. Now, but that's a very simple meaning. You know that there's a deeper meaning in this pasuk, so I want to get into the deeper meaning. Okay, but first let's continue at the simple level. V'hayu le'otot. These celestial luminaries, in addition to dividing between day and night, because you have the sun in the day, you have the moon at night, you have the moon and stars at night rather. Also, they are going to be there for otot. What does otot mean? That's a little more difficult. When God takes the Jewish people out of Egypt, he performs otot in Misraim. So what do otot mean in that context? Miracles. There's no miracles here. So that's not what it means here. So what does it mean? So the word ot also means omen. What's an omen? How is this an omen? So like the ancients, they used to look at the sky and they used to see a comet and they would think, oh, that's an omen for something, right? Is that what the Torah is talking about? Let me put it to you this way. Astrology. They used to believe, and by the way, I think today also many people still believe in astrology. They believe that the shape, the configurations of the stars and the shapes that the stars make, it has a certain significance in our life. So some people wanted to say, otot, omens, signs, astrology, therefore. Does that make sense? Does it rub anybody the wrong way? As it rubs me the wrong way? And I'll tell you why it rubs me the wrong way. We know for a fact, the pasuk says, do not be afraid or do not take seriously the signs in the shamayim. And furthermore, the Gemara has a discussion. And in the days of the Gemara was written, many, many centuries ago, and more than 1,000 years ago. And the Chachamim, some of the Chachamim in the days of the Gemara still believed in astrology. Some, not a lot, some, a few. Now you have to understand that astrology for them was like astronomy is for us today, meaning it wasn't a religious belief, it was a scientific belief. People took astrology as a scientific matter. I'll give you an example. Let's go back thousands of years ago to the ancient Babylonian, ancient Babylon of the days of Avraham Avinu. They were very advanced in their knowledge of the stars, right? And we know what they calculated, and they had tremendous accuracy in tracking the stars in the heavens, and they used to be able to predict things very well, but they believed in astrology. Their belief in astrology was scientific. They believed that the stars control us. Now, here's what happened to Avraham Avinu. Let me tell you, Avraham Avinu, he was, and we learned this from Philo, he was an astronomer. He was a scientist. He was a brilliant mind, so he's in Babylonia, and he himself was a scientist, and he studied astronomy, and because he studied astronomy, he believed in astrology. Just the way, today they tell me that, the quantum mechanics. I believe in quantum mechanics. I don't think that quantum mechanics is going to be overruled because we've performed so many experiments that prove it. But for Avraham Avinu, believing in astrology was like for us today, believing in quantum mechanics. So he believed in astrology. Now, according to the configuration of the stars, Abraham was supposed to be Akar. Akar means no children. And Sarah was supposed to be Akara, no children. Both of them. Meaning both of them, according to the stars, are supposed to have no children. And indeed, they had no children. So God tells Avraham Avinu, I want to give you some good news. You're going to have children. Okay, that's great. What does Hashem do? Does anybody remember what Hashem does with Avraham Avinu before he gives him this news? He says, Ko yezaracha. I want you to know you can have tremendous amount of children. What does he do to Avraham Avinu? So he takes him out, like Yoseh Oto Al-Chosai, he takes him outside and he takes him above the heavens. And now he's no longer on planet Earth. Avraham Avinu is somehow up there in space in the prophetic vision, right? So he sees the Mar'eh Nevuah, and in the Mar'eh Nevuah, Hashem takes him away from our realm, our earthly realm, and now Avraham Avinu is looking around. And Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, look at the stars now, and you're going to have as many children as there are stars. Okay. And the pasuk says, Vayamin. What does Vayamin mean? Avraham Avinu believed. So my question is, why did he believe? What did God show Avraham Avinu now that convinced Avraham Avinu that astrology says you're not going to have children. So why did he believe now? What did he see when he was up there? You understand the question? It's a good question. So, the idea of perspective. So for example, you have a shape in the sky. Right now it's winter, so you have the constellation called Orion. It's a particular constellation, a warrior. All right. So I used to study astronomy when I was young, and I was familiar with the constellations. I never took astrology seriously, by the way, ever. I always viewed it as nonsense, personally. And I never took it seriously, but I studied astronomy, so I know the various constellations, not because I believed in astrology. I didn't, because I studied astronomy. So now you see the stars, it's like a shape of a warrior. Why do we see the shape of a warrior? Why do we see it that way? Perspective. You understand that those stars are not really close to each other. Each one of those stars is millions, not millions, sorry, tens and hundreds and maybe thousands of light years away from Earth. Right? Each light year is like trillions of miles, okay? So why do we see the stars the way we see them? Are they actually connected? Are they somehow related to each other? No, they have absolutely no relation. But perspective from this vantage point, if you look there and you're looking at these objects, one object is 10 million light years away, the other object is 1 billion light years away, you might see them as a line, but there's no connection between them. It's just because I'm looking at them from here, right? So what did Hashem show Avraham Avinu? This my father told me when I was young, and I think he mentioned a great Chacham, Rabbi Moshe Chaifetz. I think that Melechet, I believe it was Rabbi Moshe Chaifetz, I hope I'm not misquoting. Nevertheless, that the whole thing was perspective. And what did Hashem show Avraham Avinu? He took him to outer space, you shift the perspective, and suddenly what do you see? Where are the constellations? There's no constellations. It's all an illusion. It's a mirage caused by the fact that I'm here on planet Earth and I'm looking at it from a certain vantage point. So Avraham Avinu suddenly saw, oh wow, astrology is not scientific. It's like for the first time a person believes in a flat Earth, for the first time you take him to outer space, you say, look down, what does he see? Round Earth. Earth is round, it's not flat. Oh wow, I didn't know that. The Earth is round. So Avraham Avinu is going to outer space, he's looking at outer space, he's looking at the stars. Wow, no constellations, or different constellations, different stars, different shapes, different configurations, depending on how you're looking at things, right? So Avraham Avinu rejects astrology. And now he knows he can have children. Once he knows he can have children, Hashem says, now you will have children. But first you have to give up that emunah tefilah, that false belief. Give it up. He gives it up. Great. Now, let's go to the Chachamim and the Gemara. During the days of the Chachamim, there were still Chachamim who believed in astrology. And the reason is, the same way today, we have discussions about scientific theories. Some of you perhaps take global warming seriously, maybe others don't. It's a scientific debate, right? Meaning, put the politics aside. I don't care about politics. I'm interested in truth. I'm interested in wisdom. Does Earth-made emissions, does it really cause the temperature of the Earth to go up? So some scientists would say yes, others would say no. So that's a discussion. And then maybe as a rabbi, I would fall on the wrong side of the debate. I would say I'm against I don't believe that it causes global warming. I believe that it's just natural cycles in the climate. And then maybe I would be disproven wrong. And then, so that's not a religious belief, that's a scientific statement. So Chachamim and the Gemara believed in astrology. There were some, a few, not a lot. The Gemara debates it. There's back and forth discussion. And ultimately the Gemara says, En mazal Israel. The Jewish people reject the idea of astrology. Meaning this idea is rejected. Okay, yes?
It doesn't apply to Israel, but it applies elsewhere. I mean, it exists, but it doesn't apply to us. It doesn't have any power over us. Is that what they're trying to say, or is it?
That's a very good question. And what I am trying to say is that it is not part of the intellectual vocabulary of the Jewish people.
Okay.
We reject astrology, and of course, because we reject astrology, naturally, it doesn't affect us.
Yeah.
But if you're a person who looks at the astrology paper, the horoscope, they had the horoscope. Do they still have that, by the way?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. It's just remarkable that people still read that and take it seriously. I assume people take it seriously, or no, it's just like a joke. It's like a comic thing. Oh, people do take it seriously. Interesting. So,
But the fortune teller.
Programs on the computer.
Interesting. So people take astrology seriously today. That's interesting. Okay.
Doesn't the Zohar have something to do with astronomy?
Right. No, astronomy, yes, but you have to be very careful. The Zohar is written as a code. Not all the Zohar. There's some things in the Zohar explicit, but some parts in the Zohar are written as a code, and you have to know how to decode it. That's why they had Chachamim, who are Mekubalim, who knew how to study the Zohar properly, and also the works of the Arim. But put that on the side for now. I don't want to get into the Zohar. What I do want to say is that in terms of astrology, if you believe in it, let's say you believe in astrology, and somebody says you're in big trouble today. There's a great danger lurking. You're going to be scared, and you might actually bring about a great danger upon yourself just because there is a certain power to thinking. Thought has a power, right? So if you're constantly thinking, oh my gosh, you're right. So you're drawing attention to yourself, and you're more likely to be subject to that which you believe in, right? So when we say En Mazal Yisrael, it's two things. Number one, we're saying we reject astrology. It's not part of our intellectual framework. We believe, of course, in one God, and the one God decide.
In habits, I think some Putin they have astrology, and then when the the signs of the.
Yeah, no. So what they're saying, right? What they mean by that is they're saying that every month in the year is mourning for the destruction of the Jewish people. Of course, I mean in a metaphorical sense, and also the Zohar brings many metaphorical things, as in a poetic fashion. Correct. It's true. So, but the point is, so the idea that there are omens or that somehow the stars are going to portend our fate, we reject it. I'll say more than that. It's not just that we reject astrology, we reject fate, right? The Jewish people do not believe that there's a fate. So part of astrological belief is there's a fate, the fate is written in the stars, and that's it, you're powerless. We believe the exact opposite. We believe every human being is created in the image of God with wisdom, with Kedusha. We have Kedusha in our soul. And that we are ultimately free. There is no fate. What is there? There is destiny. There is a destiny that we choose for ourselves. We have the power to choose in which direction we'd like to go. That's destiny, not fate. So the stars don't tell us. En mazal Israel. There was no mazal for the Jewish people. So that's important. Okay. Now I'm going to come to the real question. If en mazal Israel, what does the pasuk mean when it says that the V'hayu le'otot? It's talking about, again, the stars, the sun, the moon, the creations, the universe. V'hayu le'otot ul-mu'adim ul-yamim v'shanim. Mu'adim means holidays. I will explain that in a moment. Yamim means days. Shanim means years. What does otot mean? It doesn't mean miracles. There's nothing. It's not a miracle. It doesn't mean omens. So what does otot mean? So I'm going to ask somebody here. What does the word otot mean in Hebrew? Signs, but even better. Otot actually means otiyot, otot. Letters. Okay, interesting. Letters. Let's explore that. So that's actually what it means here. Otot means letters. Let me explain to you what that's about. And what I'm going to do for you now, I'm going to take 2 minutes, and I'm going to read 2 paragraphs in my father's article. By the way, I have some good news. I know many of you gave money to the foundation that I started in memory of my father, and I appreciate that. So I should mention in the Knis also, so everybody knows. First of all, there's a website. We just put up a website within the last week. We have an Instagram page, and we are now going to be republishing my father's books. We have a famous book publisher that we signed a contract with. I'm going to mention the name soon, not now. I just want to make sure that they're okay with me publicizing what's about to take place because it's a huge thing. So I'll mention the name of the book publisher when I'm free to do that. So my father's works are all going to be republished. So that's taking place. And here you see that the foundation, Baruch Hashem, with Hashem's infinite grace, is really is going forward. Okay, so one of my father's articles, my father wrote, I think, over 100 articles and 10 books published, because there's many unpublished writings as well. So one of my father's articles is called as follows. Pay attention to the name of the article. It's called God as a Writer. Okay, I want to read you just the first few sentences so that you can understand the pagan idea of God, because the pagans had many, many gods. So here goes. The Greek gods, for example, the Greek gods, you see Walt Disney movies, Hercules, right, were gods of action. They were capable of extraordinary feats and breathtaking performances. And that's why you can make a Walt Disney movie out of the Greek gods, because it's exciting, and you have action heroes and Marvel comics, and they're all, right, tremendously capable of doing these physical things. None of them, however, could either write or read, meaning the Greek gods were illiterate, right? And for the Greeks, writing was some sort of counterfeit. So the Greek philosophers would discuss the idea of writing, and they were anti-writing. The Greeks were anti-writing, they were anti-text, they were anti-books. The Greek philosophers wrote books, but when they wrote the books, they had a problem, because they said writing is a counterfeit. The real wisdom is in the soul of the person. It can't be in a book, and therefore they were anti-writing. So that's why when they wrote the books, they would write the Greek books as dialogues. For example, Plato's dialogues. We have Socrates, Phaedrus, and the various Greek philosophers. Why was it written as a dialogue? Because they were anti-writing. So in this way, they say, oh, but it's a dialogue. You understand? It's a compromise. That was just giving you the Greek thinking. Why? So they were anti-writing. The Greek gods were illiterate. And now I want to read to you a couple of sentences which I believe is the key to understanding this. Otot, letters. In Judaism, writing borders on the realm of the sacred. There is nothing holier for the Jewish people than the Torah shebichtav, the Sefer Torah we have in the Aron HaKodesh. Is there a holier object known to the Jewish people? No. The Sefer Torah is the most sacred object we can possibly have, because the Sefer Torah is the writing of God. And we consider writing to be the highest level of knowledge, because the word, once it's written down, it's stable, it's unchanging. It can penetrate your mind, and your mind can interact with those words and generate knowledge, right? So that's Jewish thinking. But for that, you need a text. Okay, did you raise your... No, okay, all right. Now, here goes. The God of the Hebrews is eminently literate. God communicates with the Jewish people, with us, in writing. So how does he do that? He gives us the Luchot HaBerit, the 10 Commandments. What are the 10 Commandments? The writing of God. He gives us the Torah, the Sefer Torah. What is the Sefer Torah? The writing of God. Of course, through the mind of Moshe Rabbeinu, God spoke, and Moshe Rabbeinu would write the words. But there is another writing. And do you know what the other writing of God is? So we spoke about the words written in the Torah. We spoke about the 10 Commandments. But according to the scriptures, according to the Pesukim in the Torah, the universe was created by the speech of God. And for the Hachamim, the universe is actually the writing of God. Because, and now according to Gemara, it is written by the speech of God, the heavens were made. The Pasuk says, Bidvar Adonai Shamayim Nasu, with the words of God, the heavens were made. We said that in the Mizmor Tehillim. So we we can look at the following incident, and there's a whole article here. It's an incredible article, by the way. I mean, it really is. I just don't want to read the whole article because I do want to get to the Pesachim. But think of the following. Moshe Rabbeinu. Nobody understood God better than Moshe Rabbeinu. So he's standing at Mount Sinai, and he's very upset. He's very upset because the Jewish people did the Eigel HaZahav. They did the golden calf, right? Okay. And Hashem said, that's it, it's over. I'm like, forget about the Jewish people, I'm done with them. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes up, he goes up to the mountain, and he tells Hashem the following words. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I have a deal for you. What's the deal? Yeah, I'm over with the Jewish people, but I'll make a new nation with you. You'll be the head of the new nation. And when Moshe Rabbeinu hears that, he's very, very upset, and he says, listen, God, if you want to do this, I'm out. And he says, V'im ayin mecheni na misifircha shel katavta. If this is what you want to do, you're not going to let the Jewish people continue. He says, mecheni, erase me from your book. What book? Misifircha shel katavta. So what is it? He says, asher katavta, that you already wrote. See, it's not the Torah. The Torah wasn't written yet. The Torah. This is before the Torah was written. Misifrecha, from your book that you wrote. Asher katavta. What is he talking about? The universe. So this universe is God's writing. It's composed of letters. And what happens when you put letters together? You get meaning. I get the letter C, I get the letter T, in the middle I put the letter A, I have a cat. That's meaning. So you put things together, right? Now a person looks at the words, an unintelligent person looks at particular words, he looks at this, he just sees scribbling and scribbling. But if you're intelligent, you see the word Yisrael. So you have to put the things together, right? Right? Every word has to be looked at. Wait, this is the letter Resh, Pe, Vav, A, Refuah. Right? Geula, redemption. So every word requires an intelligent person who's literate, because not everybody's literate. There's many people who are illiterate, right? So if you're illiterate, what do you see? You just see like markings. You see, if you're literate and you're intelligent, whoa, wait, hold on. You put these things together. There's something there. Somebody is trying to tell me something. That's the world. That's the universe. You look at the stars, you can look at it and say, oh, it's just things, it's just objects. You can do that. If you're not too intelligent, you can do that. But if you're an intelligent person, you can just try to put the things together and generate meaning. And the Chachamim are telling us, Moshe Rabbeinu understood this. He says, this is a book, I get it. I just don't want to be part of this book. Erase my name from the book, put somebody else here, no problem, do what you want. It's your book, you're the author, but I don't want it. That's the otot. The otot says the universe is meant to be read. It's there for intelligent people. There's something happening in the world. It's not just haphazard.
Didn't you just say you don't believe in astronomy?
I don't believe in astrology. No, astronomy, of course. I love astronomy. That's a science of the stars. I studied it since I was young.
So what is this? You're talking about astrology?
No, astronomy. I'm talking about the scientific aspect of the stars, the sun, the moon, the black hole, the neutron star.
But you're saying now that there's sign by looking at different...
No. There's a different type. The article goes very deeply into that. There's different types of systems of signs. You ever hear of course you did. I know you did. Hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics is a system of signs, right? Hieroglyphics, how do you express the idea of a cat? Picture of a cat, right? How do you express the idea of the sun in hieroglyphics? Picture of a sun, some pictorial image of a sun. So you don't generate meaning by putting things together. It's just the things are what they are. That's hieroglyphics. In letters, right? In a system of letters, you need an intelligent person to connect the letters to produce meaning. That's a completely different process, right? In one case, it's just like looking at a cartoon or looking at a dumb Hollywood movie, and there's a lot of those, right? So you just see images, and there's no critical thinking, and the guy jumped out of a building, but somehow, he grabbed onto a tree after a 5,000-foot fall, and and all that stuff, and he just runs after that, and then he gets 3 bullets in his, in his lungs, and he's all bleeding. Then 5 minutes later, after he was about to die, he suddenly fighting off 17, people with guns. Okay, so that's all hieroglyphic thinking. That's all like just images and pictures where judgment is suspended. That's part of what it's about, right? That's part of what, suspend your judgment and just see images. Wow, oh man, right? So they keep just throwing more and more images at you, and there's no critical thinking, and therefore it looks like a coherent story when actually it's kind of nonsensical, right? But that's not thinking in letters. Alphabetic thinking, my father wrote a whole book on that called Horizontal Society. Alphabetic thinking is a higher level of wisdom where you have to connect things intelligently, right? So for example, if I say I live in a White House or I live in the White House, one difference, I live in a White House, I live in the White House. Anyone intelligent understand, if I say I live in the White House, I must be either crazy or Joe Biden, or maybe I became president somehow and you just didn't hear about it. Or I live in a White House, you live, right? One word difference, you connect it together and you generate a whole new meaning. You can't do that in hieroglyphics. Astrology is hieroglyphics. Judaism, letters, is wisdom. It's actually called, for those of you who want to do more research, it's actually called semiological thinking, for whatever, that's worth. It's just throwing it out there. So yeah.
So scientists, astronomers that see that brilliance in the, that's what people, we get so excited, seeing, wisdom, Earth a little bit further, closer, suns, so that's like you said, God's speech, God's letters, that's his creations, and
he wants us to study. He wants us to study his creations and to understand the message. Now, in Judaism, we actually have part of the Kabbalah is there to study that very subject. You know what it's called in the Gemara?
Maaseh Bereshit.
Yes. Maaseh Bereshit means the study of the creations of God. Why would I study the creations of God? Well, it's only because it has meaning. If it was meaningless, it'd be nothing to study. So the fact that the Chachamim sat down and studied Maaseh Bereshit was exactly that. Let's put these things together and understand what's the message. There's a message here. There's a certain theme that's going on. I want to understand that theme. I want to understand how God is talking to me. That's Maaseh Bereshit. That's part of the Kabbalah, the real Kabbalah from the days of the Gemara. Now, by the way, I should add that, Hakira, the Brooklyn Journal, the journal of Hakira, it's like a journal of so it's the next edition is going to be an article of mine which deals exactly with this subject, by the way. It deals exactly with this very subject, meaning the semiological view of the universe versus the Greek view of the universe. The rabbis had a semiological view of the universe which says there's a speech here, God is talking to us, listen to God's speech. And the Greeks had a view of the universe which was metaphysical, which basically, no, there's no speech here. And I borrowed this from my father, and I'm going to tell it to you now. Imagine there was recently this object in the sky, not in the sky, I mean passing by the earth. Umanu, it was some weird name. It was like, people at first thought it was a comet or an asteroid. They didn't know what it was. And then there was an Israeli scientist, Professor Leib, Avi Leib maybe? I don't remember his first name, but it's Professor Leib. He's from Harvard University. He was interviewed extensively, including on the Joe Rogan podcast. Excellent interview there. And basically he says there is no explanation for this object because the way it's shaped and the way it was traveling, it wasn't an asteroid. It had its own motion. He says he didn't say it was aliens, okay? He didn't say that. But he was saying it wasn't just some natural phenomenon. What is it if not a natural phenomenon? I don't know, but he said it wasn't a natural phenomenon. And for a while, people saying, no, there was a part of a comet that kind of came off the comet, and that's why it was going at this weird speed, unexplained. It ends up that wasn't true. They just found out yesterday or 2 days ago that the people who went against this Professor Leib were incorrect, and actually there is now a real mystery. Okay, now, let's take that weird sounding, and I know I'm mispronouncing it, but you'll hear it, and when you hear it, oh, that's what the rabbi was trying to say. But this object, Imanu, let's say it somehow lands on Earth. Okay, and there's nobody in it. Okay, it's empty. Inside, it's hollow. On the inside, it's empty. And on the inside, you see, on the outside of the spaceship, let's call it a spaceship, just, to have some little fun. Let's say you see all these, marks. Okay? You see these marks. And a person comes and says, hey, look at these marks. The scientist says, no, this is just natural formation, millions of years traveling through space, it got scratched, and it's just scratches. You can say that. You could. You don't want to read, don't read. Or you can be intelligent. Wait, hold on. There's an alphabetic system here. Let's get some. There are people who know how to like decode different languages. Let's get somebody to decode this. And somebody comes in and he says, wait, there's an actual message here. This is writing. And the other scientist says, no, this is just a natural formation. There was some dust in outer space and it scratched. You want to do it that way? You want to say it's dust in outer space and these marks mean nothing? You can say that and you can continue having a full life and go to the beach and still enjoy a nice sunny day. Or you can say, wait, there's writing here. Maybe somebody's trying to tell us something. Let's try to decode the writing. You can do that also. That's the universe, so that's the otot. You got it? The idea, and you understand the idea of otot, very profound. I don't understand. I know this is an explanation that I haven't seen written, but I'm not satisfied with the other explanations. Some people say otot is seconds. Why is otot seconds? I don't know. Again, I'm not discounting, I'm not trying to discount the other explanations, but I just don't find them to be satisfying, that's all. So otot.
Great idea, I love it.
Thank you.
Writings of God, the universe, His creation is coming out of His mouth, in quotations, whatever that means, His speech.
Right.
Creates, has words, because that's like the luchot that we got.
Yep.
So the speech of the universe is His creations.
Yes.
And there's messages to be learned there. That's why Maaseh Bereshit, learning it, Rambam. What do? You ponder, God's creation. You can get to a high level of prophecy or knowledge of God, as far as just realizing the brilliance of the universe.
Yes.
So that's why it's important for us to learn astronomy, not
Or you can think like a kid and say it's a bunch of mishmash.
You can just say it's a bunch of mishmas. It's meaningless. Exactly. That's right. And by the way, there's so many incredible things in astronomy. Oh my gosh, it's crazy, like the coincidences but I don't want to get into that. I just want to try to make a little ground. So I want to look at this first verse. So we said, V'hayu le'otot. So now you know what otot means. So it's literally letters. Letters. Ul-mu'adim. It also mu'adim. Mu'adim, what does mu'adim mean? So the common explanation of the word mu'adim means seasons. Yeah. I just have a problem with the word mu'adim, honestly, because the seasons didn't happen until after Noach left the Teva. So why is it called? And since when are mu'adim called seasons? What?
How could that be? Wasn't the Earth still rotating?
So yeah, the Earth was rotating, but the seasons weren't set yet. The Earth was rotating, by the way, and apparently, the axis of the Earth maybe wasn't set, maybe it was wobbly. Who knows? We know that the Moon eventually stabilized it. But the word mu'adim, personally, by the way, you can accept the explanation of seasons. I said it. That's a standard explanation. I want something a little better. And I'll tell you why. Because what does the word mu'ad mean when it's used in the Chumash? Always. What does mu'ad mean? Holiday. Always. It always uses a holiday. So what does it say? V'hayu le'otot ul-mu'adim. Le'otot I understand. Letters. What is a mu'ad? I'll tell you. How do you know the holidays?
From the moon, from the lunar.
So in Judaism, the mu'ad starts when Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu already in Egypt, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim, look at the new moon. You need to follow the new moon, and if you follow the new moon, you'll be able to calculate the holidays. Now I want to tell you that the Jewish calendar was the most successful calendar in antiquity. There were civilizations that they relied on the moon to measure the passage of time. For example, the Muslims. It's a vestige of an older civilization, so they have a lunar calendar. So figure that every month is about 29 and a half days. That's the amount of time it takes for the moon to circle the Earth, to orbit around the Earth. 29 and a half days? What's the problem with the lunar calendar? Well, 12 times 29 and a half takes you about, how much is a lunar year? About 354 days. So the problem with these people who follow the lunar month is that they're always going to be behind the solar. It's called the tropical year. They're always going to be behind the solar, because how long is a solar year? How long does it take the Earth to go around the sun? 365 and a quarter. 365 and a quarter. Right, 365 days, 0.25. It's a little less than 2.25, but it doesn't matter. Let's just, 0.25. Okay, 365 and a quarter. So what's going to happen is you're going to be behind 11 days. So that's why if you look at Ramadan, let's say Ramadan, when did it come out this year? I don't remember. Summer. So now next year it'll come out 11 days earlier. And then eventually it'll come out in the winter, and then it's going to come out in the fall, and it'll come out in the summer again, right? Because the lunar year never matches the solar year. That's a problem. So people who follow the lunar year, which was most societies, because the moon is about a month. It takes about a month from moon to moon. From new moon to new moon takes about a month, 29 and a half days. Didn't work. Okay. Then you had societies, and eventually the Western civilization, the Western world rather, they adopted the Julian calendar. So the Julian calendar was based upon the fact that it takes 365.25 days for the Earth to orbit the sun, or the sun to orbit, whatever, for the sun to return to its original position in the sky. It doesn't matter whether you believe the Earth is at the center or the sun is at the center. Either way, 365.25 days. So they had the Julian calendar. The problem is that the Julian calendar wasn't precise. There was a couple of problems with it, but one of the main problems is that it's actually not at 365.25 days. It's a little less than 365.25 days, and because of that discrepancy, every century they would be off by a day, and then that would create, over the passage of time, they had real issues, where it would be winter, but it wasn't really winter yet. It was still summer, right? So they had to, eventually they made the Gregorian calendar. I think that's in the 16th century. And the Gregorian calendar was the most effective one. The Jewish calendar is the best. The Jewish calendar is the best because we're a combination of the lunar and the solar year. Meaning, on the one hand, we follow the moon, and that's great because the moon has a natural cycle of about 30 days. It's good for the mind. And by the way, and as I'm going to say later on, a lot of natural processes in the world follow the rotation or the orbit of the moon around the Earth, and it follows certain rhythms. Circadian rhythms are also based upon the lunar motion around the Earth. So there's a lot of reasons to say we want a lunar calendar. But if you have a lunar calendar, you're in really big trouble because then you have that 11-day discrepancy between the lunar and solar calendar. So the Chachamim figured it out. It's called Sod HaIbur. Sod HaIbur is really incredible, by the way, because as you know, we haven't had a Bet Din. The Jewish people lost the Sanhedrin about 2,000 years ago, right? How the heck are we still counting the holidays? How's that happening? I mean, really, just think about it for a second. Our calendar was from back then. In the days of the Bet HaMikdash, we had this calendar, and we were following this calendar, and then Hillel, not the first Hillel, the second Hillel, a few generations after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, he put together this calendar, which is really remarkable, and it works till today. And the calendar is based on the lunar year, and it's based on the solar year, and there's a 19-year cycle, where every 19 years, there is a complete correspondence between the lunar calendar and the solar calendar, and they're off by about an hour and a half every 19 years. So now we have a problem. We're like about, I think, I didn't do the calculation, but we're getting close to about a week off. Meaning the Mashiach has to come soon, because if otherwise we're going to be like, no, it has to come soon in the sense that, look how early it's getting. Like this year, for example, we had Hanukkah around Thanksgiving. Was it ever that early before? Because there's that 1 hour now, 1 hour over the course of 2,000 years, 1 hour every 19 years. So over the course of 2,000 years, it builds up and it builds up. Mashiach has to come soon because it's getting a little hairy. But the point is, it's an incredible calendar. It's certain. Now, how do we calculate the holidays?
So we adjust with a leap year.
No, it's much more complicated than that. So we have a 19-year cycle where we have 7 double months during the year. Like this year, for example, there's 2 Adars, right? And 12. So you would have 12 years of 354 days, 7 years of 383 days, and certain adjustments within that. And the incredible thing is that's the secret. It works. It's like bingo. You got it. That's why it's called Sod HaIbur. It literally was a secret that the Chachamim knew how to make the lunar calendar match a solar calendar. It's an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing how it works. I told you, every 19 years off by about an hour and a half, actually. It's really remarkable, right? So, and that's why we can still, so how do we know the Ma'adim? Because of the sun and the moon. You got it? That's what it's talking about. I'm putting the sun and I'm putting the moon, and there's going to be a certain correspondence between these two things that will enable you to calculate the holidays. Right there, black on white, without the sun precisely, the day is 365.25 minus a couple of minuscule decimal points, and the moon being exactly 29.5, but it's not exactly 29.5, it's off by, right? And the correspondence is just incredible, meaning it works. It's like God put it there so that we can use it to calculate the holidays. That's what it's saying, Mu'adim, holidays.
The holidays, because the sun and the moon help us when we get the calendar, get it, sort of get the
That's-
holidays correct. So that's connected.
That's
The connection.
the calculation.
Okay, good.
There is no Jewish calendar without the sun and the moon. Doesn't work. Right, yeah.
So just a quick question. I like the explanation you gave earlier, but it uses like the plain meaning. Why wouldn't somebody say these are symbols so that you could calculate the holidays?
Oh, Mu'adim, I know.
No, but when it's
Otot
saying otot,
are-
the otot, these are the symbols. They
Right, well,
separate them,
yeah.
and you have symbols to calculate the holidays.
Right, well, first of all, le'otot, because it says le'otot wul mu'adim.
Right.
It says and. So it's not the same. So otot, apparently the word ot, again, we in Hebrew, we have the idea of letters, right? So the idea of ot, it's a homonym. It could mean a miracle, it could be a symbol, it could mean letters.
Yeah.
And I think letters mix. And what I like about letters is because, but the and is the key.
So
And is the key.
there are two meanings there, and you have to.
Exactly. Otot,
Right.
Wul Moadim, the holidays, there. Wul Yamim Veshanim, of course, you have the days, and you have the years. Okay, so that's what I want to say about this. Let's continue. There's a lot more to say, but it's getting late. I do want to finish this particular day. So next class, we'll go into day number 5. Okay? Give me a moment to find myself here. Yes. Okay.
Like that idea, what you said about Abraham, once he got out of the realm of, in court, he was caught up. How do we know that? Was there any proof or anything that pointed us in Torah, in the Mikra, that says that he was?
Yeah, because the minute God.
Astrology, and the.
Right, no, the Hachamim teach us in the Midrash Rabbah, they say it's Sem istagninim shelcha. It's that when Hashem took him out, it says that God told him, give up your belief in astrology. It's Sem istagninim shelcha, right?
Really?
Explicitly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hachamim in that Midrash was spot on.
Crazy, right? No, the Midrashim are.
Was this before he broke the idols?
After, because he broke the idols when he was in Babylonia. This took place in Perashat Lech Lecha, which is after he was already in Israel. So yeah. Okay, so now let's continue in the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, V'hayu lim'orot birkiya hashamayim leha'ir al ha'aretz. And the me'orot will be there to shine light upon the earth. The me'orot are there, leha'ir, to shine light. So, okay, I mean, that's obvious, right? Why else would you have these luminaries there if not to shine light? I like the word leha'ir, though. I think it's such a beautiful word. And where do we use the word leha'ir? Can you think of a place in the Chumash where we use the word leha'ir? Like, so for example, you have Birkat Kohanim. So in Birkat Kohanim, you have the word ya'er. What does ya'er mean? Ya'er Hashem panav elecha. Hashem should shine His face upon you. So what does that mean when you say ya'er Hashem panav elecha? So leha'ir doesn't just mean light. It means a special providence. There should be a special providence upon you from God. So God's wisdom should take care of you, right? That's Ya'er Hashem panav elecha. The Kohanim are giving the Birkat Kohanim. You should be blessed, so Hashem's light will protect you, will take care of you, right? There's a special hashgacha peratit. And I think this is alluded to here when it says that the luminaries will be there leha'ir ala aretz. There's a certain hashgacha peratit. The earth is at exactly the right distance from the sun. If it was closer, as you know, the atmosphere wouldn't be able to exist, the oceans wouldn't be able to exist. I mean, obviously, if things are evaporating, if Earth was a little farther, there would be, the oceans would be ice, there would be no life. So there's a certain hashgacha peratit in the way the sun and the earth are perfectly aligned so that there can be life on earth. So leha'ir here doesn't just mean light. It does mean light, of course, but it also means a special protection. There's a special protection that we get. The sun is there to protect us, right? There's many asteroids and many comets that fly by us, and one of the reasons they fly by us is because the gravity of the sun pulls them, right? So the sun has many effects on the earth. So that's leha'ir ala aretz. Let's continue a little more. The pasuk says vayichen. Vayichen means, and it was so. What does it mean vayichen, and it was so? So I want you to understand the way Maaseh Bereshit works. Always Maaseh Bereshit, it always starts with Vayomer. Like the second day says, Vayomer Elohim ikavu hamayim. The third day, that was the third day. The second day was Vayomer Elohim, Yehi Rakia. Right? The third day, Vayomer Elohim ikavu hamayim. Fourth day, this is Vayomer Elohim Yehi me'orot. So also the fifth day. It says Vayomer Elohim, so God says it, right? And then it says Vayichen. What does it mean, Vayichen? And it was so. And then the very next word says, Vayas Elohim et shnei ha'me'orot ha'gedolim. God created the two great luminaries, the sun and the moon. So when it said Vayichen, what does it mean Vayichen? So there's Vayomer, God says it, Vayichen, and it was so. And then it says Vayas Elohim, and God did it. So what are these three things? So it's important, again, to understand Maaseh Bereshit, and again, you see the wisdom of the Torah. Vayomer, it means literally God spoke. This is God's speech, right? So God spoke, meaning he had a certain particular scientific rule that he wanted to be in the world. Vayichen. And this scientific rule actually was, rule was actualized. It came into place, right? So there's the idea, right? So Vayomer means this is the idea that God has. Vayichen means, and so it was. This idea became so. So for example, you have a rule of gravity. So there should be gravity. And then there is gravity. Vayas Elohim means God acted in accordance with this rule. Why do we have to say God acted in accordance with this rule? If God thought the rule, and now the rule was actualized, it's there, that's it. Everything works perfectly. So why do we need Vayas Elohim? Then we have to, and God did this. Why do we need that third step? The first two steps are enough. Again, God thinks the rule becomes reality, and that's it. Why do we have to have, in addition to that reality, Vayas Elohim, and God did it? Because every rule in the world is subject to God's will. That's the important point. I'll give you an example. Water has certain properties, right? Water has certain properties, the way it flows, the way the water molecules kind of stick together, right? So the water has a certain fluidity, so certain rules governing water. And then there's Kiryat Yam Suf. What happens in Kiryat Yam Suf? God suspends that rule, meaning this rule that Vayichen, this rule now is actualized. It becomes real. God never loses his authority. God never cuts himself away from the world. God is always actively governing the world. So even though, yes, there is a rule, there's a scientific rule, and yes, the rule becomes actualized. It now governs everything. If I touch something solid, that's it. I feel it. It's solid. My hand's not going to go through this wall, right? But that's Vayas Elohim. The same way God can function in accordance with the rule that he made, he can function differently, and he can do Kiryat Yam Suf, or he can take the blood and turn it into, take the water, turn it into blood, take the blood, turn it into water, right? He can do that. He's not subject or conditioned by the rules. He controls the rules. Very important point. Very deep point. Let's continue in the Pesukim. Vayas Elohim et shnei ha'me'orot ha'gedolim. So God makes the two great luminaries. Let me ask you, which is bigger, the sun or the moon? Obviously the sun. And by a heck of a lot. The moon is actually kind of small. Why are they called shnei ha'me'orot ha'gedolim? Why are they both called the great luminaries? The sun is much larger because it's not talking about size. It's talking about the light that they produce, right? So the sun produces light. And in the daytime, the sun is prominent, and the moon doesn't produce light. We discussed that last week. It was in the Pesukim, but it reflects the light of the sun. That's why it's called Ma'or Gadol, not because of its size, but because of the prominence of the light that it produces. Again, every word is precise. The great luminary, which is the sun, of course, it governs the daytime. The smaller luminary, the smaller in size, which is the moon, it governs the nighttime, and the et kochavim, and then he also made the stars. A couple of points on this. Number one, both the sun and the moon, they don't just produce light, they have a certain control over what happens on the earth. I'll just give you an example. For the sun, of course, produces light, it controls the weather, it gives plant food. The sun produces plant food. If it wasn't for sunlight, there would be no photosynthesis. And if there was no photosynthesis, there would be no plants, there would be no life as we know it on this planet, there would be no oxygen. So you see the sun, it's not just that it produces light, it governs many, many cycles on the planet, right? That's why it says, Et ha'ma'or hagadol lememshelet. It has a certain governance. That's, again, profound idea. The moon has a certain governance. I researched this topic extensively. I said I'll just bring a couple of small examples of how this small object called the moon, I'll give one of the examples is the moon is responsible for the massive reproduction of corals on the Great Barrier Reef, where trillions of zooplankton discharge their spermatoza into the ocean throughout fertilization. And you know when this takes place? It always takes place on the months of October and December, right after a full moon. And the scientists established this, that there was a relationship there's a synchronization between the moon and when this great coral reef, which is a part of the food cycle and food chain in the ocean. So here's one thing. So the moon, you see, has a tremendous effect on the ocean. I'm going to give you another example, again, just to show you that when the Torah says the moon governs what's happening on this planet, spot on. Another example, a study in Sweden studied the migration of birds, migratory birds in the winter, and they found many, many connections between the moon and the birds. For example, I'm just going to read this to you. Here it is. The birds' departure on their 3-month-long autumn migration south consistently took place around 10 to 11 days after the full moon. Individual birds synchronized their migration and flew off at that precise time. And the researchers were astonished that there was a certain lunar cycle that it governs the migratory cycles of birds. And there's so many, many other examples. I'm just saying this to show you how the Torah, again, says something. It says, the sun governs the world. It gives light to the world, that we understand. But it says it governs. It does, actually. And it says the moon governs the world. It does, yeah. It's not just light. It has profound effects. I wasn't talking about the obvious things, like the tides in the ocean and other things. But that's what I wanted to bring to your attention now. We have 4 minutes, so I'm just trying to figure out what to skip and what not to skip. Okay. Look at this. Look at the pasuk. It says, Et ha'ma'or hakaton lememshelet halayla ve'et ha'kochavim. Why are the stars not considered memshelet halayla? The moon is memshelet halayla. Again, it says the sun, lememshelet hayom. It says the moon, memshelet halayla. And it says ve'et ha'kochavim. Why not ve'et ha'kochavim memshelet halayla? Or not? Why not the yarech and the kochavim memshelet halayla? The stars are specifically excluded. Again, now if you lived in the days of Aristotle, you thought that the earth was in the middle, and then you had a sphere for the moon, a sphere for the sun, a sphere for the stars. They're all kind of there. There's no fundamental difference between those. This is what Plato believed. This is what Aristotle believed. It's not till after Galileo in Italy, when he was the first one. Well, actually, it was he wasn't the first one. It was Copernicus from Poland who first thought of the idea that the earth is not in the middle, but Galileo proved it by looking at a telescope. Nevertheless, he was thrown into the dungeons of the Inquisition. I think he died. Yeah, he actually died in the dungeons of the Inquisition for daring to go against the Christian view of the world, which was that the earth is in the middle. Look at the Jewish view. It says the Kochavim are not part of the system. They're excluded. You have the sun, which has a profound effect on the earth. You have the moon, which has a profound effect on the earth. And the stars are some other realm. Because the stars are not part of the system. It's a completely different system. Aristotle would not understand this. Plato would not understand this. None of the early astronomers would understand it. The church certainly wouldn't understand this. But to us today, knowing the science, we know, the stars have nothing to do with the solar system. The stars are, way out there, and they have no direct effect on the earth, at least. There was a great Chacham called Rabbi Chasdai Kreskas. Rabbi Chasdai Kreskas was the head of the Jewish community in Aragon in the 14th century. He's a very well-known philosopher. If you Google his name, he actually appears in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophers. He was also quoted by many Renaissance philosophers, including Giordano Bruno and others. And he has a book called Or Hashem, the Light of God, and he examines, among other things, these Pesukim, and he partially uses some of these Pesukim as a way to attack Aristotle and to attack the Aristotelian worldview. So he's one of the first people who did this, who kind of paved the way for breaking the Aristotelian model of the universe, right? Partially based upon these Pesukim. So it's an incredible history. I see we're done with what we can do for one day. Next week, we're going to go to the 5th day. Let's just read the Pesukim just for the sake of reading it. ויתן אותם אלוהים ברכי השמיים להאיר על הארץ ולמשול ביום ובלילה ולהבדיל בין האור ובין החושך וירא אלוהים כי טוב הערב ויבוקר יום רביעי. I just believe in reading the Pesukim just for the sake of reading it, so we don't skip anything. But next week we'll go to Yom Chamishi. If there's any questions, I'll take them now. Otherwise, we'll pray Arvit. Birkat Hamazon and Arvit. Okay.
Yeah, question, go ahead.
Please.
Okay. The letters also have numbers.
I'm sorry?
The letter has numbers, so that's all the letters have a number.
Correct. Right. You can change an aleph to a 1, change a bet to a 2, like so on and so forth. That is correct. Yes.
It's just amazing.
It is.